Mariana? Perfect.
No, Mr. Speaker, I'll let you know. Mr. Speaker, you're now live.
Good morning. Wyoming House of Representatives will please come to order for the second day of our session, Wednesday, January 27th. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Convening roll call for the second day, Wednesday, January 27th, 2021. Andrew.
Here.
Baker.
Here.
Banks.
Here.
Bear.
Present.
Blackburn. Blackburn. Brown.
Here.
Burkhart.
Here.
Burt.
Present.
Clausen.
Here.
Clifford.
Here.
Connolly.
Here.
Crago.
Present.
Duncan.
Here.
Eklund. Eklund.
Here.
Air.
Here.
Flitner.
Here.
Fortner.
Here.
Gray.
Here.
Greer.
Here.
Hallinan.
Here.
Haroldson.
Here.
Harshman.
Here.
Heiner.
Here.
Henderson.
Here.
Hunt.
Yep.
Jennings.
Here.
Kenner.
Here.
Knapp.
Present.
Larson Lloyd.
Here.
Larson Dan.
Here.
McGuire.
Present.
Martinez.
It just came up on a little screen.
Here.
Nyman.
Here.
Gotcha.
Newsom.
Here.
Nicholas.
Here.
Oakley.
Here.
Obermuller.
Here.
O'Hearn.
Here.
Olson.
Here.
Ottman.
Here.
Paxton.
Here.
Provenza.
Here.
Roscoe.
Here.
Schwartz.
Did you find it?
Schwartz. Sherwood.
Here.
Simpson.
Day one.
Here.
Summers.
Here.
Stiff.
Here.
Stivar.
Present.
Sweeney.
Here.
Walters.
Here.
Washit.
Here.
Western.
Here.
Worth.
Here.
Williams.
Present.
Wilson.
Here.
Winter.
Here.
Yin.
Here.
Zawanitzer.
Here.
Mr. Speaker.
Here.
Blackburn.
Here.
Schwartz.
Here.
We have 60 present.
Thank you very much, Chief Clerk. Welcome, members of the 66th. We have a important day as we get started on our work for the state of Wyoming. At this time, I'd like to ask Representative Lloyd Larson to offer our prayer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our Father in heaven, as we come before thee this day, we'd like to extend our appreciation and gratitude for the opportunity to live in this great country and the state of Wyoming that we live in. We're thankful for our military men and women serving around the world to protect our freedoms and plead for thee to inspire them as they contemplate the decisions they have to make. Father in heaven, as we continue to navigate the challenges presented by this existing pandemic, we ask thee to bless Governor Gordon with inspiration as he addresses the difficult decisions required of him. We ask that thou would bless all those engaged in developing vaccines, that they might be blessed with knowledge and a greater understanding on how to reduce the impact of this virus. Please bless all of those, Heavenly Father, who are impacted either with their health, their profession, or business, that their burden would be lightened. And Father, please bless all of us to be tolerant of each other's opinion on this matter. We're grateful to all of those who are willing to serve as an elected representative in this legislature. And we ask for thy blessing to inspire us for the good of the state and her citizens, to bless us with the spirit of compassion, and to bless us with the ability to understand the information being presented today in the Committee of the Whole. We're thankful for our staff and pray that thou would bless them with patience, health, and endurance. We ask that thou would please bless our technology to function as designed and allow us to do the work we're committed to do. And finally, Heavenly Father, help us to be respectful and kind. And this is our prayer, and we ask it in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Representative Larson. We appreciate those words. Now, members, we'll do our Pledge of Allegiance. And for those in the chamber, you're certainly welcome to stand and salute or place your heart over your flag. For those online, we have a flag on your screen. If you'll join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. So thank you very much, members of the 66th. We've begin this journey, and the first thing we'll have is Chief Clerk, the Journal Committee report, please.
Mr. Speaker, your Journal Committee reports that the Journal of January 12th, 2021 has been read and recommends that it be approved. Signed, Representative Haroldson and Provenza.
Thank you very much, Chief Clerk. Chief Clerk, are there any messages from the Senate?
No, sir.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen of the public, I want to assure you, I see a few folks here in the gallery, that also in the Capitol on the first floor, rooms 113 for the House and room 110 for the Senate, you can view the proceedings online. So we have established that for your convenience, so you can see our entire proceedings. The next order of business for us today is reports from standing committees. Now, members, this is all the work that you've done in the last week. This is all the committees, all those bills. And what occurs now is the Chief Clerk will read those reports back to the body. And once those reports are read back to the body, then we can take action on them. And so that's what we will be doing next. And those are the bills that will come before us in Committee of the Whole. So with that, Chief Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 1, Judiciary, to whom was referred House Bill 34, Youthful Offender Program Amendments, respectfully reports same back to the House with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Craigo, Larson, Dan, Oakley, Olson, Provenza, Williams, Washit, Yin, Zwanitzer. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 1, Judiciary, to whom was referred House Bill 35, Theft Statute Amendment, respectfully reports same back to the House with recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Craigo, Larson, Dan, Oakley, Olson, Provenza, Williams, Washit, Yin, Zwanitzer. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 1, Judiciary, to whom was referred House Bill 42, Chancery Court Vacancy Amendments, respectfully reports same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Craigo, Larson, Dan, Oakley, Olson, Provenza, Williams, Washit, Yin, Zwanitzer. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom was referred House Bill 47, Department of Family Services, Indigent Burial Program, respectfully reports same back to the House that the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Kinner, Larson, Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stith, Walters. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom was referred House Bill 48, Community Juvenile Services Block Grant Program, respectfully reports same back to the House with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Kinner, Larson, Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stith, Walters. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom was referred House Bill 49, Agency Fee Revisions. Respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Kenner, Larson Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stith, Walters. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 3, Revenue, to whom was referred House Bill 30, Public Utility Assessment, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Baker, Hallinan, Harshman, Henderson, Roscoe, Sweeney, Yin. No, Gray, Jennings. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 3, Revenue, to whom was referred House Bill 55, Tobacco Tax, respectfully report same back to the House with recommendation that it do pass. Hallinan, aye. Harshman, or ayes. Harshman, ayes. Hallinan, Harshman, Henderson, Roscoe, Sweeney, Yin. Noes, Baker, Gray, Jennings. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 4, Education, to whom was referred House Bill 2, School Building and Facilities Study, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Brown, Harshman, Newsom, Obermuller, Paxton, Summers. No, Andrew, Connolly, Nyman. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 4, Education, to whom was referred House Bill 62, Suicide Prevention, respectfully report same back to the House with a recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Connolly, Harshman, Newsom, Obermuller, Paxton, Summers. Noes, Andrew, Brown, Nyman. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Land and Water Resources, to whom was referred House Bill 44, Omnibus Water Bill, Construction, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Blackburn, Clausen, Eklund, Fortner, Heiner, Larson, Western, Wharf, Winter. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom was referred House Bill 45, Changes to Water Right Notice Requirements for Hearing, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Blackburn, ayes, Blackburn, Clausen, Eklund, Fortner, Heiner, Larson, Dan, Western, Wharf, Winter. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Land and Water Resources, to whom was referred House Bill 53, Invasive Plant Species, respectfully report same back to the House with a recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Clausen, Eklund, Larson, Dan, Western, Winter. Noes, Blackburn, Fortner, Heiner, Wharf. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom was referred House Bill 58, State Parks Account Expenditure Authority, respectfully reports same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Banks, Flitner, Haroldson, Knapp, Newsom, Sweeney, Winter. Noes, Hunt, Jennings. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom was referred House Bill 59, Public Health Emergencies, Immunity Amendments 3, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Banks, Flitner, Haroldson, Hunt, Knapp, Newsom, Sweeney, Winter. No, Jennings. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom was referred House Bill 66, 2021 Large Project Funding, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Banks, Flitner, Haroldson, Hunt, Jennings, Knapp, Newsom, Sweeney, Winter. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 7, Corporations, Election, and Political Subdivisions, to whom was referred House Bill 13, Alcoholic Beverage Regulation, respectfully reports same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Blackburn, Clausen, Clifford, Duncan, Ayer, Hunt, McGuire, Roscoe, Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 7, Corporations, Election, and Political Subdivisions, to whom was referred House Bill 15, Department of Transportation Communication Facilities, respectfully reports same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Blackburn, Clausen, Clifford, Duncan, Ayer, Hunt, McGuire, Roscoe, Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom was referred House Bill 27, Business Code Revisions, respectfully reports same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Blackburn, Clausen, Clifford, Duncan, Ayer, Hunt, McGuire, Roscoe, Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom was referred House Bill 29, Burials for Indigent Persons, respectfully reports same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Blackburn, Clausen, Clifford, Duncan, Ayer, Hunt, McGuire, Roscoe, Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom was referred House Bill 17, Range Management at Military Training Areas, respectfully reports same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Baker, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Henderson, McGuire, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Stivar. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, Military Affairs, to whom was referred House Bill 18, Military Training Memorials, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Oh, I'm sorry, I have an incomplete list of members. Give me just a second. Ayes, Brown, Burt, Henderson. No, I'm sorry, I repeat that. Ayes, Brown, Burt, Henderson, McGuire, O'Hearn, Baker, Burkhart, and Stivar. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom was referred House Bill 19, Antique Motor Vehicles, respectfully reports same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Brown, Burt, Henderson, McGuire, Obermuller, O'Hearn. Noes, Baker, Burkhart, and Stivar. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom was referred House Bill 25, Tribal Vehicle Registration Exemption Implementation, respectfully report same back to the House with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Baker, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Henderson, McGuire, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Stivar. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 8, Transportation, Military, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom was referred House Joint Resolution 1, Traumatic Brain Injury and Post-Traumatic Stress Treatments, respectfully report same back to the House with recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Baker, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Henderson, McGuire, Obermuller, O'Hearn, and Stivar. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 9, Minerals, Business, and Economic Development, to whom was referred House Bill 6, Trust Company Amendments, respectfully reports same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Bear, Burkhart, Duncan, Ayer, Gray, Greer, Heiner, Sherwood, Western. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 9, Minerals, Business, and Economic Development, to whom was referred House Bill 8, Consumer Credit Amendments. Respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Bear, Burkhart, Duncan, Air, Gray, Greer, Heiner, Sherwood, Western. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 9, Minerals, Business, and Economic Development, to whom was referred House Bill 9, Short Time Compensation Program. Respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Bear, Burkhart, Duncan, Air, Gray, Greer, Heiner, Sherwood, Western. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, to whom was referred House Bill 3, Certified Addiction Practitioners Certification Amendments. Respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Clifford, Connolly, Flitner, Hallinan, Ottman, Martinez, Worf, Wilson, no, Stivar. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, to whom was referred House Bill 4, Mental Health Provisions Practice Act Amendments. Respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Clifford, Connolly, Flitner, Hallinan, Ottman, Martinez, Stivar, Worf, Wilson. And those are your standing committee reports.
Thank you, Chief Clerk. So members of the body, and particularly for the new members, generally we don't have that many standing committee reports at one shot. We'll have them 3 or 4 times during the day, half a dozen at a time. And actually, I think you'll find them quite informative when you don't have an onslaught of them, of what the bill is. It kind of gives you a preview of the committee action before it comes to committee of the whole. So that was not typical. And I do thank the chief clerk. Usually we have a reading clerk that does the reading for us. So the chief clerk's voice by the end of the day may get a little stretched, but we do appreciate her doing that for us. At this time, we're going to do something that's also a little different than normal. And I'm going to call on the majority floor leader to re-refer bills that have appropriations in them and re-refer them en masse to the Appropriations Committee. So generally, each chairman would bring their bills and there'd only be a couple at a time. But because we have so many this time, we felt it'd be more efficient to just have the majority floor leader refer them all there at the same time. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to re-refer the following bills. House Bill 44, Omnibus Water Bill Construction, from Agriculture to Committee Number 2 Appropriations. House Bill 58, State Parks Account Expenditure Authority, and House Bill 66, 2021 Large Project Funding, from Travel to Committee Number 2 Appropriations. Mr. Speaker, I'd also like to re-refer House Bill 29, Burials for Indigent Persons, and House Bill 17, Range Management at Military Training Areas, from Transportation. Oop, I got off on my line, so I got to start backwards a ways. So sorry about that, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, House Bill 15, Department of Transportation Communication Facilities, and House Bill 29, Burials for Indigent Persons, from Corporations to Committee Number 2 Appropriations. And then, Mr. Speaker, House Bill 17, Range Management at Military Training Areas, and House Bill 18, Military Training Memorials, from Transportation to Committee Number 2 Appropriations. And Mr. Speaker, House Bill number 4, Mental Health Professions Practice Act Amendments, from Labor to Committee Number 2 Appropriations. And Mr. Speaker, House Bill number 2, School Buildings and Facility Studies, from Education to Committee Number 2 Appropriations. Mr. Speaker, a note to committee chairs: if you have a re-referred bill in House Appropriations at noon, please go to the link and click the testify link. Then Chairman Nicholas can call on you or your proxy if bill explanation is needed. Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Mr. Majority Floor Leader, did you refer House Bill 9 from the Minerals Committee?
Mr. Speaker, I think I might have missed that. So as well, I'd like to do House Bill 9, Short Time Compensation Program, from Minerals to Committee Number 2 Appropriations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Majority Floor Leader. Chairman, are there any other re-referrals that need to be made to House appropriations? Any other re-referrals? Seeing none, then House Bill 2, House Bill 44, House Bill 58, House Bill 66, House Bill 15, House Bill 29, House Bill 17, House Bill 18, House Bill 9, and House Bill 4 are all re-referred to Committee Number 2, Appropriations. Thank you very much. Members, that generally will not be the way it occurs. We will have the committee chairman do them as they come onto the floor, but like I say, we're in little unique times now. So with that, members, we'll soon have a motion from the majority floor leader, but I just want to explain for the new members and for the public, our next order of business is Committee of the Whole. And that is the first reading on the floor of the House of Representatives or the Senate. And as you know, we do 3 readings. So today will be Committee of the Whole, first reading, and then if they're followed in successive days. So second reading will be tomorrow and third reading will be on Friday. Now there's some possibilities we might accelerate some bills if they're simple bills and don't need anything. But that's our order of business today. So on your legislative website for those in the public and our members too, there's a general file list. You can pull that list. It has the hot links to the bills. And then there's another page for amendments that you can put in the bill number and the amendments will pop up. So with that, Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House resolve itself into Committee of the Whole.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor, please raise your hand to your screen. Thank you. Those opposed? The motion is carried. The Committee of the Whole will please come to order. And generally for the members of the body, at this point, generally we have a member of the body come forth and do Committee of the Whole. Because of the circumstance we're in today only, I'm going to actually conduct the Committee of the Whole just as a matter of hopefully efficiency and to kind of help us set a tone and a pace in conjunction with our committee chairman. So at this point, we will start an interaction between myself as the Committee of the Whole chairman and our chief clerk, and then we'll get in, tie into the members first through the committee chairman and then to the body to discuss bills. So the first bill for our consideration is House Bill 6. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 6, sponsored by Minerals Business and Economic Development, an act relating to trust companies. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 9, Minerals Business and Economic Development, to whom was referred House Bill 6, Trust Company Amendments, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Bear, Burkhart, Duncan, Ayer, Gray, Greer, Heiner, Sherwood, Western.
Thank you, Chief Clerk. You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure? Chairman Greer.
Mr. Speaker, I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises reported, do so with the recommendation that House Bill 6 do pass. And Mr. Speaker, for explanation of the bill, I'll turn it over to the distinguished gentleman from House District 19.
I believe that's Representative Ayer. Representative Ayer, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a real honor to be the first presenter of a bill in this session.
We're honored to have you.
I bring you House Bill 6 and ask for your favorable consideration, and I'll provide a brief explanation. I realize that we're on somewhat shaky ground having a non-attorney explain a trust bill, but I have our good chairman as a backup. House Bill 6, Trust Company Amendments, is part of an ongoing and collaborative effort by the trust industry and the state banking division to keep Wyoming in the forefront of the trust industry. Because of our statutes and our regulatory environment, Wyoming is one of the most favorable locations for U.S. and even international trust companies. For instance, our banking division has applications from 4 such trust companies currently pending. Although small, this is a bit of a growth industry. Trust companies provide benefits by moving trust assets into our state and creating jobs for attorneys, accountants,
Is this Brianna again?
Fund managers, and so on. This bill is important because it will help us maintain that cutting edge status. Now on to the bill. Section 1 on pages 2 through 9 creates a new section 13-5-426. This section adds language governing mergers and acquisitions. This language is not new. It is pretty much copied from current supervised depository trust company statutes. This new section is needed to clarify and consolidate the laws governing trust company acquisitions and mergers. We'll move quickly through on section 2 at the bottom of page 9 and continuing on page 10. This amends statute 13-1-604 to expand the state banking board by adding one trust company representative. It also alters the representation to eliminate the requirement that one member represent a national bank, since Wyoming only charters 5 national banks. On page 11, 13-5-301 is amended to expand the definition of trust company to include a foreign trust company that is already formed outside Wyoming and is authorized to do business in our state. They will still have to have a presence in the state and are subject to Wyoming supervision. Page 11, 13-5-417 authorizes the commissioner to direct a failed trust company to file in bankruptcy court rather than go into receivership. The idea is, if it is in the best interest of the state, have the bankruptcy court manage the dissolution of the company rather than the division of banking. Page 11, 13-5-501 provides recognition of a trust company formed in another state seeking a Wyoming charter. Page 12, 13-5-603 does the same thing for family trust companies. And finally, on page 12, 13-5-604 clarifies that meetings of chartered family trust companies can be in person or, as we're meeting today, in virtual meetings. With that, we'll answer any questions or ask the good chairman of minerals to help me with answering any questions that may be asked.
Thank you, Representative Ayer. Do any of the members have a question or an inquiry for the good representative or any of the members of the committee?
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I didn't see who it was, so
Larson.
Representative Larson. Thank you. Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the work in this. Mr. Speaker, this committee has done great work on trust, and it's been a while since I've sat in that committee, and so I support the bill, but I need a little clarification on a couple of things, and I'm hoping my good friend from Bridger Valley can help me understand that. On those first few pages where you take language that exists, can you help me understand or remind me how that works? If you've got a company that comes in and consumes a former trust company, and they create a new trust company, and the new trust company or the trust company that came in and made the merger is governed by statutes from another state. The consumed trust company was governed by the conditions that were applicable in this state. Then does the resulting trust company, are they governed by the other state's laws, or is the consumed trust make them applicable to Wyoming? Can you just remind me how that works? And then I'd like a follow-up question after that, if I may, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Larson. I see Representative Ayer is available, and I see Chairman Greer has his hand raised. So I will defer to the chairman for the first question. That'll be great. Thank you, Chairman Greer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And while I'm sure Representative Eric could handle the question easily, I'll just help with this. And the question can be answered very easily. It depends. And really what it depends upon is where the resulting trust company, the company that exists after the merger, desires to be located. So if they, and what laws they want to follow. So what has happened is, because the laws of the state of Wyoming have now been worked so well that we have clear, concise, easy laws to follow, Wyoming is becoming very attractive for other companies to want to come to Wyoming. And so when you read through those pages, what you'll find is that this is an opportunity for the company to be subject to the regulations in the state of Wyoming. They have to be located and have a physical presence in Wyoming, but they're allowed to also have branch offices too, and we've limited it to 2 at this point in time, which from the testimony we received in committee was sufficient. And so what the idea being is, you can have a Wyoming trust company, have the benefits of our laws, the benefits of our supervision, and still be able to expand. So hopefully that answers the question. And I realize depends is not a very good answer, but it just depends upon where the resulting trust company wants to, what jurisdiction they want to submit to.
Thank you, Chairman Greer. Representative Ayer, did you want to add anything? All right, thank you. Representative Larson, you had a follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our good country lawyer for that explanation. Indeed, it did help. So my next question comes down to page 10, where here, as I read this bill, it's a trust. It's dealing with trust company amendments, and we come in here and we change the board representation for the banking board. And so if I could just get a little help in understanding why they felt it was important to have a representative from the public trust company as a member of the board. And then more importantly, they changed the makeup here from the national bank and state bank. And historically in this body, we've heard some discussion in segregating the interests of a state bank and a national bank that is located in the state. And we've kind of kept a breakup of that a little bit different. In here, we are saying that that we're going to have appointed members of 5 from a state or national bank. So why did they combine them? And then if you could just help me understand how changing the makeup of the national and state banks is germane to this trust bill.
Thank you. I'll start with Chairman Greer to respond. I think there was 3 questions in there, and Representative Henderson, you'll be up next. Thank you, Chairman Greer.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, good question, just germane, because we put it in a bill. But no, it is germane, and I'll answer that question first, because that we have under the supervised trust now, the number that was thrown out was somewhere around 15 million in managed assets, and that number is growing daily. And it was important when you compare that to the overall weight of assets being managed and held by the banks, that be included, and that they have a say with respect to the commission. It's becoming more and more relevant. So that's why this decision was made, was make sure that was specifically included. It was agreed to by the associations that all have a vested interest in how this commission is comprised. With respect to the national bank and state bank, as Representative presented the bill said, there's only 5 nationally chartered banks in Wyoming, and what has happened is that they sort of each take their turn on the commission, and it's been more and more difficult to get them to, and these are again large national banks, is to get one of their executive officers to actually come and attend the meetings and participate. And so while they still can be on the commission, we've just removed that requirement to make sure that there is one available. If one of them wanted to take that time and come to Wyoming and put the time in that the commission does, they still would have that opportunity. It was just starting to become more and more difficult, and the absentees at the meetings were starting to show. So that's why this amendment came. I answered two questions. I don't know if I recall the third one exactly.
Thank you, Chairman Greer. We'll give Representative Larson a moment, and then let's go to Representative Henderson. Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to speak about my support for this bill because of the important things it'll do for the trust industry in Wyoming. But I wondered if we could get a brief example, please, on page 11 on the insolvency provision there, line 14 to 18, and the relationship with Title 11. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Henderson. Representative Larson, do you want to get your second question while either the Chairman Greer or Representative Ayer are thinking about the first question?
Yeah, I really do think it comes back because just to the point of
Mr. Speaker, I think you refer to your presiding officer.
Chairman, I think that is the way we're supposed to do it, and appreciate that to my good friend from the land north of me, who notes that oftentimes things in the bill are germane to the bill. We know that that's not always the case, and he, being the great detective that he is a master of identifying that historically. And so I think the question that was brought up is, so why are we changing? How is changing the structure of the bank board for state and national banks germane to this trust fund? Is it, or should that have been done in another bill? And it's not just because it's in the bill.
Thank you. Chairman Greer, we have two questions, one from Representative Henderson, one from Representative Larson, if you'll take those. Next will be Representative Stith. Chairman Greer.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, I think how this came up is we were just dealing with all those issues that were out there regarding the trusts and the development of supervised trusts within the state of Wyoming. This particular item was one that the committee and the commission and the associations that oversee the entities that are regulated by the Banking Commission all just felt that it was appropriate with this, and I personally think it is appropriate. We're trying to make sure that the regulation of these trust companies is clean and clear and easy for the world to follow when they come and cite themselves in Wyoming. And one of them was to make sure that they have clear representation on the board. So that's the best I can do to answer that question. And I appreciate the compliment, I guess, on my.
Representative Greer, we've lost your audio.
Mr. Speaker, with request to the other question regarding the, you guys able to hear me okay?
We can hear you now. Yep. Now we've lost
a little
you.
bit more. Is that better?
It's intermittent, so maybe you have a connection problem. Chairman Greer, please proceed.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, yeah, my computer say my internet's unstable. Is that better now?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Please proceed.
So going back to the question from our good representative here in Cheyenne, the insolvency. So I'm gonna get my years wrong on this. When we did the complete rewrite of supervised trusts was 6 or 8 years ago. And a gentleman from Fremont County was on minerals at the time we did that. And since then, that interest has peaked and picked up, and the industry has built. And I had misstated. It's much more. I think it was 15 billion, not $1 million managed assets. But so the fees that are charged need to be necessary and reasonable for the supervision. And then also, if you go in and look at those statutes, there's a reserve fund that's available. Okay, and that reserve fund is to be used if a receivership has to come into place, and the commission has to step in and manage those trusts through dissolution. All right. Well, that fund is building. They couldn't build it all in 4 or 5 years. That fund is building. And so with a lot of discussion on this, it was decided that with this statute that we could go ahead and use the benefit of a bankruptcy court, which would be a much more efficient model. So what bankruptcy courts do is they deal with creditors, and they deal with an equitable distribution of the assets. Would have that option, that arrow in their quiver, to go ahead and file and go into a Chapter 11, and it'd ultimately be a 7 to dissolve it, rather than have to fall back on a reserve pool and work and spend all the dollars to be necessary in a receivership. And so I think it's a good forward-looking stopgap. At some point in time, that reserve will be built up high enough that the funds will be available to ensure that there can be a dissolution of a trust and a receivership.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Greer. Any other discussion? Representative Stith, did you have a question?
Mr. Speaker, my question was addressed by the good representative from District 27, and I support House Bill 6.
Thank you, Representative Stith.
Question?
Members, is there any other discussion on the bill? Any other discussion on the bill? Representative Obermueller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have a question on page 11. And just it has to do with the definition of a trust company. And when you read the definition of a trust company, as you work through the language there, and this isn't part of any of the changes that have been made to it, but it's just the wording overall. And that a trust company is engaged in trust company business. And when you try to find definitions of what trust company business is, if you turn back to page 10 of the bill, and this is part of the language of this bill, on line 12, it refers to a public trust company as defined by 13.5.301. And if you go to that definition, that also refers to engaging in trust company business. So I'm not sure that somewhere there should be a reference to what a trust company is in terms, I guess, of what a trust is, and if that definition could be pointed to in this bill, it would be helpful in the understanding it, I believe, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Obermueller. Chairman Greer, would you like to respond to that, or anybody like to respond to that? All right. Further discussion on the bill. Further discussion on the bill. Further discussion on, seeing none. All those in favor of Chairman, now I should preface this. So we're now going to take our vote on Committee of the Whole, our first reading vote. And by rule, it's a voice vote followed by, if there's a question, a division vote followed by a roll call vote. What I'm going to do is ask you to raise your hand for the vote. If somebody wants to call division, then we'll do a roll call. But by rule right now, I'm limited. I can't go straight to a roll call, and I apologize for that, because I think that would be was something that I'd hope to be able to do, but we'll still go ahead. So all those in favor of Chairman Greer's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill, sorry, I got to get my number up here. 6, thank you, Chief Clerk. House Bill 6 do pass. Please raise your hand to your screen. Thank you. All those opposed? Thank you. House Bill 6 has passed Committee of the Whole. And members, just so members, as you know, you can scroll. I have 49 participants on one screen, so it takes just one click for me and I can see everybody. So when we're on the floor and it's a voice vote, you'll hear ayes and then you'll hear noes as the chairman calls for them. And it's not quantifiable except, by the sound. On the screen, of course, it's quantifiable because you see everybody waving at you. But if someone wants to have a division, we'll go directly to a roll call vote. If it's a close vote, I'll do it all automatically, but that's how we'll proceed if there's no objection. So the next bill for our consideration is House Bill 8. Reading clerk, please read the bill.
House Bill 8, sponsored by Minerals Business and Economic Development, an act relating to trade and commerce. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 9, Minerals Business and Economic Development, to whom was referred House Bill 8, Consumer Credit Amendments, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Bear, Burkhart, Duncan, Ayer, Gray, Greer, Heiner, Sherwood, Western.
You have heard the reading of the bill. What's your pleasure? Chairman Greer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises report to do so with the recommendation that House Bill 8 do pass. And Mr. Speaker, before I turn over the explanation of the bill, I'd like to move Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 8.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, I'll go ahead and explain or dispense with the amendment, but I would like to further divide the amendment, Mr. Speaker. The division that I propose would be Division 1 would be lines 11 through 22. That would be Division 1. Division 2 would be lines 1 through 10, Mr. Speaker.
All right, members. So for the new members, this is a new process. So there was the standing committee brought amendment out, and for some reason, and the good chairman will explain this, there's something needs to be done with the amendment. So they can bring the amendment to the floor and then they'll divide it. So if you have available your amendment on your page, you can take the amendment and the line numbers, the numbers, each line is numbered. Division 1 by the chairman's motion is 11 through 22. And Division 2 is 1 through 10. And what the chairman will do is he'll rule whether it's divisible or not, because there are technical reasons while you have to get everything together on the right page. This one is very clean by my review. And so the chairman will rule, and I'm going to rule now, that the amendment is divisible. Chairman Greer, which division would you like to proceed with?
So, Mr. Speaker, I would like to go ahead and proceed with division number 1.
So members, just to remind you, this is lines 11 through 22 of the Standing Committee Amendment, House Bill 8, number 1. Please proceed, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. So members, I'm going to ask you to vote no on Division 1. This amendment, after this bill had been worked through the interim, worked with a subcommittee that had a special meeting with all of the stakeholders. This amendment came to us in the House Standing Committee meeting last week. It passed out of committee by one vote, and there was a little bit of confusion about that. And some of the confusion has been clarified since that meeting last week. This deals with a concern, and it really goes to page 27, and it deals with the fees, and it's a notice fee that's charged for a consumer credit application that goes into the commission for oversight. Okay, so nothing new on this fee. There was a concern that the way when we cleaned up this statute, that it was necessary to put our state banks on par with everyone else, and so the testimony that came in last week, sort of at the last minute, was, well, wait a minute, we need to do this differently with respect to auto loans. That was a specific concern. And so the amendment was drafted to try to address that. Well, the simple fact of the matter is it really muddied the waters. And I think some of the testimony, some of the questions by the committee members are right on point. Is it everyone has their forms set up when they do this, and to have consistency, whether you're applying to a state bank or a national bank or a credit union, the consistency has some value. And so with the language that we put in, what we actually did was remove this notice fee across the board, which were all the way. I mean, you got furniture stores, appliance stores, RV dealers, all of these folks that engaged in consumer credit. So what the best result is to vote no on this standing committee amendment, leave the bill as it had worked through the interim with all of the stakeholders, and make it as clean. And this will be this is a long cleanup of an old piece of legislation, as much overdue. So with that, I guess I'll take any questions, but overall, I'm just asking the body to vote down Division 1 on Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 8.
Question.
You are muted, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. My apologies. All those in favor of Standing Committee Amendment Division number 1 of Standing Committee Amendment number 1, please say, please raise your hand to your screen. Thank you. All those opposed? The motion has failed. So now this part of this division has failed, so will not be included in the bill. That bill will not be amended by this time. Now we're on to Division number 2. Chairman Greer.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll try to go quick on this. These were both of these items in Division number 2 are easy cleanups. And so if you go to page 2 of the bill and you'll look at, starts on line 15, we're striking the language, the duty to facilitate a refund or credit under the subsection shall also apply to voluntary cancellation of insurance or other products by consumer. All the language up above says the same thing. It's redundant language. There's no need to call out a voluntary cancellation versus a forced cancellation. A cancellation is a cancellation. We just think it makes the bill a little bit cleaner. With respect to the item on page 3, Mr. Speaker, what you'll look, if you turn to page 3, starts on line 8, says if termination on subsection A of this section occurs as a result of the default of a consumer, any required refunds may be applied to the amount owed by the consumer to the creditor. So these are dealing with credit insurance products, and what the testimony was is that those refunds, and if they're applied to the amount owed or given back to a third party or given to the consumer themselves, are all covered by the individual contracts or agreements entered into. And so this statute would override a lot of existing contracts. The committee felt after the additional testimony to go ahead and strike that language. So that is the division number 2 to Standing Committee Amendment number 1, Mr. Speaker, and I'd ask the body to vote aye.
Thank you. Any discussion on division number 2 of Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 8? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Division 2, Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 8, please raise your hand. All those opposed? Division 2 has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Chairman Greer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, body, for bearing with me on that. Now it is my great honor to be able to turn the explanation of House Bill 8 over to the distinguished lady from House District 5.
Vice Chairman Duncan, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I bring to you House Bill number 8 and ask for your favorable consideration as I walk through the bill at this time. On a high level, this is a modernization and cleanup bill. It's the biggest change that is being proposed is to combine 2 separate and confusing methods for licensing and registering a creditor to authorize them to extend consumer credit in Wyoming into one section that clearly outlines the requirements. The bill is also clarifying that the licensed lender can also engage in sales finance company activities without the need to apply for and pay the expense of carrying a second license. Please bear with me as I go through the bill. We just made several changes, so those couple sections are going to be muddied when I explain, but you've already adopted the amendments. So I apologize in advance. If you'll turn to page 2, line 6, this new section 40-14-454 pertains to the refunding of unearned charges for credit related to ancillary products if the coverage terminates. This is part of what we just amended. If the coverage terminates prior to the term which it was written, it requires the creditor at the time of termination make or facilitate any refunds to customers within 60 days. Ancillary products are things like credit life insurance, disability insurance, and gap waivers. Turning over onto page 3, line 4, 40-14-454B requires that unless otherwise provided by law or established by rule of the commissioner, any necessary refund of credit-related ancillary products upon termination shall be made on the pro rata basis. Insurance statutes already require that credit-related insurance products be refunded on that pro rata method. Continuing over onto page 4, line 13, delete the comma and insert the word "and." On lines 14 through 15, delete the words consumer-related loans and consumer-related sales from the law, as these sections are not necessary and are confusing and cause regulatory inefficiency. Moving on over to page 5. On page 5, lines 2 through 4 is deleted to make it consistent in all of our laws with the citation for a depository institution. And on line 4, insert the word depository institution. Down to lines 7 through 8, the inserted language is to clarify for late payment charges that the current installment is the period between regularly scheduled payments. Lines 10 through 16, the Wyoming Uniform Consumer Credit Code, UCCC, applies to creditors who are regularly engaged in extending credit. This definition is to clarify how that term is currently enforced and matches the standard under the federal regulation Z, the truth in lending. Lines 18 through 19 are just conforming language. On page 6, line 1 through 18 is a technical change to include new definitions in the definition index. Line 20 is deleting the reference to consumer-related sales, as sections 40-14, 257 through 260 are being repealed. On the next page, page 7, line 1 through 3 is clarifying language to clarify to the current requirement that persons making consumer credit sales or leases need to be registered with the Division of Banking. Lines 13 through 14 is to delete the inefficient language that doesn't come into play and limit the coverage of the Wyoming UCCC to consumer sales of $75,000 and under. Line 19, and continuing over to page 8, is to increase the minimum finance charge amount for revolving charge accounts from 50 cents to $3. The 50-cent amount was established in 1968 and is being adjusted to reflect the inflation over time. This same change also is being made on page 14, lines 11 through 18 for revolving loan accounts. Further down on lines 17 through 22 is clarification language. The Military Lending Act, MLA, enforcement is already contained in Article 3 loans of the Wyoming UCC, but is being added to Article 2 sales, as recent changes to the MLA could make the requirement to apply in some sales transactions. Over on page 9, lines 4 through 5 is clarification language to delete references to 40-14-523, as that provision was repealed in 2013. Line 11 through 19 is clarification language to specify specifically that states in the statute that payment servicers are not required to be licensed as a sales finance company, and that a company holding a lending license under Section 302 can also engage in sales financing without having to obtain a second license. Starting on line 21 and continuing over to page 10, line 6, this clarifies that a depository institution and lenders licensed under 302 can engage in sales financing without obtaining a sales finance company license. Lines 11 through 12 on page 10 is deleting the reference to consumer-related loans, as sections 40-14, 355 through 358 are being repealed. Line 14 through 19 is a change to the confusing and inefficient distinction between consumer loans and supervised loans, and making all lending covered under one section requiring a license for all consumer lending. On page 11, line 5 through line 20 through page 12, line 5. This is to clarify that first lien mortgage loans are required to acquire ownership of property are not covered under the Wyoming UCC. They're covered under the Wyoming Residential Mortgage Practices Act. Line 15 and 18 on page 11 is to delete inefficient language that doesn't come into play and limits the coverage of the Wyoming UCCC to consumer loans of $75,000 and under. And if you are over on page 12, line 7, and this continues on to page 20, line 12, these changes are necessary to clarify the confusing and inefficient distinction between the consumer loan and the supervised loan, and to consolidate all lending activities into the one section like we did previously. If we pick up on page 20, line 20 through 23 is clarification to the citation of the Military Lending Act. And over on to page 21, line 5 and lines 10 through 14 is a technical change needed for the creation of the new section 40-14-454. From line 16 through page 26 on line 3, these changes are necessary to clarify once again the confusing and inefficient distinction between consumer loans and supervised loans. Jump to page 26. And on lines 10 through 12, again, is a technical change to address the repeal of sections 257 and 355, consumer-related sales and consumer-related loans. And on the next page, on page 27, this is where our amendment was, that lines 2 and 3 is what we just addressed. Line 11 and 12 are technical changes as the Office of Thrift Supervision no longer exists. On page 28, lines 11 through 12 is a technical change to reflect the new ending section of the Wyoming UCCC. And that concludes my walking through the bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you very much, Representative Duncan. I see one hand raised, Representative Chairman Olson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the good representative, so as I look at this, there's an awful lot of statute being repealed, and I understand in summary, those provisions are obsolete and therefore we're repealing them. But could you just explain in a little more detail, because as I look at page 28 and I see, half the page is a repealing statutes. Can you just succinctly maybe summarize why they are obsolete, and so I can understand why they're being repealed? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Chairman Olson. I'll go get another question and give Representative Duncan or Chairman Greer some time. Representative Stith.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. And this question is for the good representative from District 5 or District 27. It relates to page 2, lines 15 through 18. And I just want to make sure I understand what the current bill language as amended is. I think the effect of the amendment, I think, is to delete that sentence. So that's my first question is, did we delete? And the sentence specifically reads as follows: the duty to facilitate a refund or credit under this subsection shall also apply to voluntary cancellation of insurance or other products by a consumer. And my understanding is that that's now not part of the bill. That's my first question. Okay, so my next question is, why did we do that? Because normally in insurance, if you pay an annual premium for vehicle insurance or health insurance or any kind of insurance, and you voluntarily cancel it halfway through the year, then the insurance company is obligated to give you a piece of your premium back because it's unearned premium, because for the second half of the year, the insurance company is not taking any risk because you've canceled your policy. So This provision seems to apply to a situation where I go into a car dealership, I buy an $80,000 vehicle, and the car dealer says to me, hey, you know, your monthly payment is $1,200 a month, and you want to make sure that you can pay that. So we're going to sell you some credit insurance or credit disability insurance so that if you become unemployed or disabled, there's an insurance there to make your monthly payment so you can keep your fancy vehicle. And I say, great. And what they do is they charge me the entire $3,000 premium for all 6 years of the loan up front, right? And if I go home and say, gosh, I really don't want credit disability insurance for the next 6 years, and I voluntarily cancel the policy, it seems like the effect of what we're doing is to say that the insurance company just gets to keep all the money and I get no refund. Is that what this does? Thank you. I apologize for the length of the question.
Thank you, Representative Stiss. So I think we have two questions before us from two different requesters. So I'll start with Representative Duncan. Do you want to take the repealers question, or who would like to take the repealers question that was brought up by Chairman Olson? Representative Duncan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will take a stab at it, but I will definitely need backup from my chairman. From my understanding, the way most of the repealers are changing the from the language and such of the two types of licensing that you were required, and getting rid of that and making it one. So there's a lot involved with that. There's also the repealers of getting rid of products that are no longer standing, no longer that they're no longer doing or using. And then as far as the amendment, I'm going to need Mr. Chairman to help me, but I think I probably misspoke and maybe he misspoke, but page 2 is not a part of the amendment.
Yes.
That line did not get removed as far as I am reading. So so that stays in place. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Duncan. So Vice Chairman Duncan. So just for the members, this is just for educational purposes. Section 3 is what Chairman Olson was talking about for the new members. And these are all portions of statute that are being repealed. And so it's often, the verbiage is not in the bill. You have to actually go to the statute books to find what is being repealed. So that's why that question often comes up when we're explaining a bill, particularly on committee of the whole. Let's go ahead and finish off that page 2 thing. Chairman Greer, and then I have Representative Jennings, Representative Newsom, Representative Washut. Chairman Greer.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm having technical difficulties here. So first on the repealers, the bulk of those repealers deal with the supervised loans, which is now an obsolete. So if you go through that, those were a bunch of different references to supervised loans. So those are no longer needed. And then as the representative that explained the bill said, some of them are products that don't exist. Now, with respect to page 2, the amendment did remove those lines that the good representative asked about. And so what I would do is ask the representative to go ahead and go on down to section B on page 3. He's absolutely right when he explained this. Yeah, you buy a product and it's a length of insurance over, say, a 5-year loan, and then if that's terminated early, you're entitled to a certain amount of refund. There's no doubt about that. And we had a tremendous amount of discussion within all of the stakeholders that are involved in this area. And so the refund is still available. What we came up with is that we talked in terms of a pro rata component, but we also finally came, and this was a little bit of punting, but it was the only thing that made the most sense, was allow this to go through the rulemaking process, because we heard testimony from all the way around. Pro rata makes sense, right? That's easy to say. But if you take out a car loan, okay, the most risk on that insurance is the first 12 months. So did you earn 70% of the premium in the first 12 months or not? And the committee really got bogged down on that. So that provision is in there. So the refund is available. It's still there in subsection B, excuse me. We went ahead and put in, specifically directed the commission to engage in rulemaking so that those parties that sell these products can go in and hash that out through the public hearings in rulemaking and be a little bit more flexible. Hopefully that answers those questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Gurn. I think maybe I got my order wrong. So I'll start with Representative Washut, and then it'll be Newsom, and then it'll be Jennings, and I apologize. Representative Washut, you had a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is on page 8. It references a $3 fee that's being increased from, what, 50 cents or something. My question is, why does this have to be specified in the statute? That we set a fee and leave it linger for years and years until we get around to raising the fee again. Can it be deleted entirely, or is there a reason why we have to set this fee limit in statute?
Thank you, Representative Washut. Let's get another question. Representative Newsom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple things. One is if somebody could define for me the difference between consumer and supervised loans and why we're consolidating those into one type of license. The other is on page 27, referencing the sandbox waiver. I'm hoping someone can refresh my memory, as I am not part of that world. So I'm hoping someone can refresh my memory as to what that sandbox is. And what its purpose is and why they would have a waiver. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Newsom. Representative Jennings, would you like to ask your question? Then we'll try to circle back to our committee folks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is on page 19 and 20 with the new language. I'd just like to have a little clarification what that looks like in real life. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Representative Jennings. Representative Jennings, would you clarify which lines on the pages you referred to so the chairman or the committee can respond?
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, it starts on 19, line 23, and ends on page 20, line 7.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So who from the committee wants to take up 3 questions you have now? Chairman Greer.
Yeah,
Chairman
Mr. Speaker, I'm going to have to defer to Representative that explained the bill that served on the subcommittee on the question regarding the difference on the supervised loans, on that definition. Sorry, I've drawn a blank on that. She'll be more familiar with it. I can answer the question regarding the sandbox waiver very easily for you. So if you recall, there are certain waivers that we did for technology development. And this came through our blockchain, that series of bills. And there's innovation in the banking, lending, in a lot of different consumer areas where there's a product or an idea, they can register with the Banking Commission or with the Secretary of State's office, depending upon what type of product it is. They have a waiver for a period of time, and it's approved and overseen to bring that product up to see if it's going to work, sort of a beta test. And then when that does work, or that product goes on out to consumers, it can be ready to go, and then we go into full regulation at that time. So it's sort of an innovative idea with the sandbox. The question regarding the fees, I agree that when we set fees in a statute, then we find ourselves every 20 years updating them. This is how this bill was worked. It was referenced, something I don't think we really did discuss during the interim. I actually have a personal bill coming forward dealing with all fees for the Banking Commission in a uniform process. Maybe that bill would be very ripe for an amendment to go ahead and address this at that particular time. So that was a good question. The other question I want to say here on multiple agreements, and I think if I understand that question, I think that's just to prevent any gamesmanship when dealing with married persons. They come in and somehow be able to stack different loan agreements. And let me just take a quick look. Yeah, I think that's just a consumer protection to people that are issuing these loans, that they can't play some games and then stack higher fees or charges on a married couple. That married couple comes in and buys a sofa set, right? That's what these things are kind of used for. Is you couldn't have one loan agreement for the wife to buy the couch and another loan agreement for the husband to buy the the recliner. And then charge a bunch more loan fees for it. So I think that's just that consumer protection on that. So sorry, I'm going to have to defer to the representative from House District 5 on that question regarding those definitions. Sorry.
Thank you, Chairman Greer. Vice Chairman Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm frantically searching my notes, but the closest I can come is if you look at under the definition, supervised financial and supervised loans are going to be those that are going to be from a depository institute. It's persons, types of loans that are other than like insurance and those kinds of entities. So there's a difference between consumer loans or those that people who regularly give loans. So that would be more like probably more like your bank. But I will have to come back to you because I'm frantically searching for my notes and I'm not finding them readily at hand. But it's a difference between people like insurance, car dealers, different entities like that versus an actual lending institution.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Any further discussion on the bill? Any further questions or discussion on the bill? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Chairman Greer's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 8 as amended do pass, please raise your hand to your screen. And just for the members of the public, I've worked with our staff and they're going to scroll the screen as well so the public can see. I'm just giving everybody a moment. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your hand. Thank you. House Bill 8 has passed Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Joint Resolution 1. Chief Clerk, please read the bill.
House Joint Resolution 1, sponsored by Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs. A joint resolution requesting Congress to enact legislation and requesting that the Veterans Administration work to expand and improve efforts to treat traumatic brain injuries and post-traumatic stress disorder. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom was referred House Joint Resolution 1, Traumatic Brain Injury and Post-Traumatic Stress Treatments, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes: Baker, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Henderson, McGuire, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Stivar.
Thank you, Chief Clerk. You've heard the reading of the joint resolution. What is your pleasure? Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with a recommendation that House Joint Resolution number 1 do pass. There are no standing committee amendments, and I turn over explanation of the resolution to the good representative from District 39.
Thank you very much. Representative, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honor to be not only the first freshman representative, but also the first libertarian in Wyoming's history to present this joint resolution to our House floor. With that, I bring to you the House Joint Resolution number 1 and ask for your favorable consideration. I will refer to the resolution along with some supporting information at this time. So some history, we currently have 22 U.S. military veterans that commit suicide every day directly related to traumatic brain injuries, TBIs, along with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Suicide losses now exceed combat casualties in the United States. When TBI is associated with a psychological trauma such as military combat, PTSD may also develop with that. Medications can help with this treatment. However, TBI side effects can be unknown without knowing the full depth of the injury itself. So what this resolution does is it asks for the VA to look into hyperbaric oxygen therapy, which is the HBOT. And what this actually does is it saturates the body's tissue with an oxygen-using pressure vessel. And pressures used range from an increase of 1/2 to 1.5 atmosphere, raising the oxygen level in plasma roughly 700% up to 1,200%. And during this increased pressure, the oxygen acts like a drug, and in the DNA signaling agent, it actually reveals brains light up with activity after this treatment. There is a limited amount of information. It is not widely used, but there is one case study. The first battle casualty to be treated with hyperbaric treatment at 1.5 atmosphere was a U.S. Army Brigadier General Pat Manny. He was retired for the blast-induced brain injury in Afghanistan. His treatment was ordered after 9 months of therapy at Walter Reed, when his conventional treatments had shown minimal improvement. As a result of his injuries, he was a non-functional and unable to return to his job, let alone redeploy back to Afghanistan. After the HBOT treatment, he was discharged from Walter Reed and returned to a civilian job as a Florida state judge. According to treatnow.org, which is a veterans group dedicated to preventing veteran suicides, more than 4,000 combat vets with TBI have received this hyperbaric treatment, and with 8 of the 10 showing brain function improvement. We could look at some cost savings for each active duty brain injured soldier returning to duty. The lifetime savings to the government is $2.6 million and $2 million for each injured service member returned to work or school. And between 60 and 80% of the veterans participating in the National Brain Injury Rescue and Rehabilitation Project, they're returning to either work, duty, or school after receiving the hyperbaric treatment. So with that, how can we see if the hyperbaric treatment benefits Wyoming veterans? So from the Office of the Adjutant General, Wyoming is home to roughly 45,000 veterans. The VA estimates that roughly 2% of the veterans are receiving care for TBI. With those numbers, a rough estimate, we roughly estimate 900 Wyoming veterans could benefit from this additional treatment. Additionally, Wyoming is also home to 6,650 currently serving members between active duty reserve and National Guard. The Department of Defense estimates that roughly 20% of active service members have at least one TBI and 10% have a multiple of TBI and PTSD combinations. So with the additional statistics, we can add an additional 1,300 active serving veterans that could benefit from this additional treatment. So if the numbers are correct, and we're looking at roughly 2,200 veterans that could benefit from this treatment in Wyoming alone, with a 60 to 80% return rate to work life, we could see 1,300 to 1,800 Wyoming veterans' quality of life change to where they could live a happier, more active lifestyle once they had before joining the military and putting their lives on the line to defend their freedoms. So like I said, there is not a lot of information out there with a lot of case studies. But with that, Mr. Speaker, I will yield for any questions.
Thank you, Representative Burt. Well done on the first presentation by a freshman legislator this year. Any questions for Representative Burt? Any questions for Representative Burt? I'm going to take a Representative Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker, I listened into during the interim part of the presentation, and so my understanding is the closest treatment would be available in Colorado is that correct?
Thank you, Representative Sweeney. Anybody like to respond to that question? Representative Burt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am not a medical profession by any means, any trade. So actually where the treatments are being conducted, I am not familiar with that. I apologize.
Oh, no worries. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm going to take just a brief moment of personal privilege and thank our veterans. Thank the veterans that serve in this body. Thank the veterans of Wyoming. Thank those active duty folks, Guard, etc. I'm also thankful that now there's 2 Marines in the House. So thank you, Representative Burt, for joining me.
Yes,
all right,
sir.
any further discussion on the bill? Representative Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Excuse me. Just for the new members, this is a joint resolution. Resolutions are a little different than a bill changing statute. Usually they're done to show the support of the legislature for a particular issue or to encourage action on a particular issue. In this case, to encourage our congressional delegation to support a current bill that's winding its way through Congress to encourage the use of this treatment for our veterans. And that's the nature of a joint resolution, just so the new members understand.
Thank you very much, Chairman Burkhart. Representative Provenza, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a question in terms of have the treatment that we have listed in this House joint resolution. Sounds like the evidence isn't conclusive at this point, but we do know that there are proven strategies to work with PTSD, specifically in veterans. Are those any of these programs, in terms of speaking with maybe folks with the American Psychological Association or experts in this field, have they been spoken to in regards to this resolution in terms of what treatment we're asking Congress to bring? Thank you.
Thank you. And so members, sometimes there are questions where nobody has an answer to. You saw that probably in the last discussion. They need to find some more information. So I'm just going to open it up. Does anybody want to respond to Representative Provenza's query? Representative Burt, please proceed.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So the combined injuries of both TBI and PTSD is what the resolution is for. Hyperbaric oxygen treatment itself, if everything that I've been able to study to actually prepare for this, doesn't actually have a direct result on post-traumatic stress disorder treatment in itself. However, when PTSD is an associated side effect of PTSD or of the TBI, studies have shown that when the hyperbaric treatment has been applied to the TBI with an increase of brain function, that there is a resolve of the PTSD going down. So I haven't reached out to the psychological and anybody across the nation side, but with some of the neurological studies that are out there, this isn't directly going towards PTSD as a therapeutic way, but when the PTSD is associated and related to TBI, then we can see a direct correlation that PTSD situation can be resolved, in a particular way.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion on the joint resolution? Any further discussion on the joint resolution? Seeing none. All those in favor of Chairman Burkhart's motion. Oh,
Mr.
thank you very
Speaker.
much. Yeah, Representative Brown, please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I was actually just wanting to let you know Representative Duncan had her hand up.
Thank you. I apologize. So for the members that are on the screen, and if you'll raise your yellow hand that's on the bottom toolbar, that helps me a lot. And I'm trying to see the screens as well. So Representative Duncan, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A quick question. Are any other, this is to the representative that is bringing the resolution, Are there any other states doing the same resolution at this time?
Thank you, Representative Duncan. I'll go with Representative Williams next, and then we'll come back to Representative Burt if he chooses to respond. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Burt. Just a question to the committee bringing this forward, this resolution. I question whether or not there was a reason the word commit was used in the resolution versus die by suicide, which is a more commonly used term in the field of suicide prevention.
Thank you, Representative Williams. Just a reminder to the body that the chairman or the presiding officer is the only one who calls members by their names. It's happened a couple of times, and it's not a big deal. We're getting things knocked off, getting the dust knocked off, and learning. But I just want to remind that the chairman, I'll call you by name. You can respond to me by chairman or Mr. Speaker, but not within the body, because as you know, as we recall, we're speaking through the chairman or through the presiding officer. So thank you very much for those two questions. Does anybody want to respond to those questions? I don't see any hands. All right, more. Okay, Representative Brown, I see a hand. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I can't definitively answer, but I want to make sure that we don't leave completely unanswered questions. So I can tell you this came from the Department of Defense, and the Department of Defense was the ones that were requesting some of the states. So I would highly assume that some other states are actually in the process of working a very similar piece of legislation or joint resolution requesting again. And we're really just looking at our legislative body going out and requesting that the U.S. Congress authorize some of these treatments for some of these traumatic brain injuries and post-traumatic stress disorder injuries that are occurring. So this is not anything more than a statement of the body asking Congress to do something. This will be sent out, and of course, Congress will look at it, and hopefully they will do something with it. But and then to the other question related to the term commit as opposed to die by suicide. Unfortunately, I don't think that type of discussion really boiled down into our committee, but I would highly encourage, if that's something you wish and you feel passionately about, certainly bring a second reading or third reading amendment, and let's have that discussion about whether or not we want to include that. That certainly would be a favorable amendment in my opinion, but we would also just want to see that through the rest of the body.
Thank you very much. Chairman Eklund.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I recall a few things too, and the last representative covered most of the bases. In that testimony, the gentleman that presented the information was a counselor to these veterans, and he believed that the hyperbaric chamber would be another tool to the toolbox. He is traveling around, he and others, I believe, are traveling around the country presenting this resolution in hopes that it'll pass Congress and they'll be able to further their study of it. But it has had some promising results. It just isn't, they're not conclusive, but they are hopeful that it would help. And it was the medical professionals who brought it to us.
Thank you, Chairman Eklund. Representative Henderson. You're still on mute, Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Please proceed.
As a member of the Veterans and Military Affairs Task Force this last 2 years, I'd like the body to know that this subject did come up a couple of times, and most recently at last meeting here in December. So there's a lot of activity across our country, a lot of interest in doing what we can with these HBOT treatments for the traumatic brain injury.
Thank you, Thank you, Representative Henderson. Chairman Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I just want to add that before the previous speaker was on the NCSL Military Affairs group, I was on that. So about 5 or 6 years ago, even then, we had presentations at the national meetings on the possibility of hyperbaric treatment. So I just don't want people to think that it was some sort of, we know how sometimes you get these random letters, in the interim saying, oh, do such and such, and you wonder where it came from. But it has been under consideration for some while. And in fact, the VA started offering hyperbaric treatment at a number of its facilities as far back as 2017. And I do know that there's consideration in Washington as well. So I just wanted to add that to the historical background on this. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Chairman Wilson. Further discussion on House Joint Resolution 1. Further discussion. Scrolling my screen, seeing no further discussion. All those in favor of Chairman Burkhart's motion of the Committee of the Whole rises to report and do so with the recommendation that House Joint Resolution 1 do pass. Please raise your hand to the screen. And I'm asking LSO to scroll the screen for us. All those opposed? Thank you. House Joint Resolution number 1 has passed Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 48. Please read the bill.
House Bill 48, sponsored by Appropriations, Community Juvenile Services Block Grant Program, an act relating to community juvenile services. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom was referred House Bill 48, Community Juvenile Services Block Grant Program, respectfully reports same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Kinner, Larson-Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stiff, Walters.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Nicholas?
Mr. Chairman, I move when the Committee of the Whole rise and report, it does so with a recommendation that House Bill 48 do pass. Now we'll turn the explanation of the bill over from the good representative from Lander, I believe.
Vice Chairman Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I bring to you House Bill 48 and ask for your favorable consideration. And I'll explain the bill, would ask for the Speaker's good clarification because I can't remember if it's a breach of legislative etiquette if we use the name of an agency in our discussion. Could you remind me how that works before I screw up?
I don't know that it would be a mess up, but I think generally we just try to address agencies in broader terms of what they may do on behalf of the state, not by their state protocol name, if you will. So broader terms would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the reminder. And so, members of the body, this will be one of 2 or 3 bills that you're going to see come through appropriations as we went through the budget process in December, where in complying with the governor's recommendations to his agencies to reduce general fund appropriations to help us through the financial difficulties we're having, some of the agencies in meeting that requirement found that there's some statute requirements that kind of put them in a pickle as they make their step 2 and 3 reductions. And this is the case here in House Bill 48, where the agency that oversees our juveniles and foster care is required in 2 different places in the statutes in Title IX that identify that agency and their responsibilities, and also when you get into Title 14 in the Juvenile Justice Act, where the agency is required to provide funding for the Community Juvenile Service Board. And what the intent of that has been over the years is to provide some funding to allow a single point of entry for juveniles into the juvenile justice system. It's used in 14 counties around the state. How they would previously get those funds is funds were appropriated to the department. Applications are made by the counties to receive funding, and then they distribute those funds based on the number of applications versus the amount of funds appropriated and available to them. That single source of diversion with the intended diverting them, it varies from county to county. It's not defined in statute. And so the department came back and as part of their step 2 reductions, reduced funding to this board as this for funding these boards, but the statutes have that requirement in there. What we're doing is, you'll see on page 1 and again on page 2, as at the beginning in both Title 9 and Title 14, we're saying subject to the availability of funds. So we're not eliminating the program, but we're telling, but we're saying when funds are available, we can provide those block grants. When funding is limited, as it has been, it may be adjusted. When there are no funds, it may not be provided at all. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Larson. And just for reference for the committee, it's off, or for the committee of the whole, you know, on line 11 is the agency that the good representative was talking about. So certainly you can reference a line if you want to point out an agency by name without saying it on the floor. So are there any questions on this? Representative Conley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against this bill, and honestly, for the others that were alluded to by the good Vice Chair of Appropriations, I very much see and appreciate what Appropriations is doing, and that it honestly meets my desire for what I call tidy statutes. But honestly, this is one of the examples of, I would call it a little bit of the cart before the horse, that what we'll see, I think, in the appropriations in the JAC budget bill is that there will be a cut to this program, and in fact, probably bringing it down to no money at all. This is an incredibly important program in my community, and I think in many of yours. It has worked incredibly well in terms of dealing with juveniles and juvenile offenders in ways that are less punitive and far more able to have those kids interact in our communities. And we'll see it later on with some of these other bills that come up, that there is a cut to those programs that our communities are using. So I will vote no on this, because I truly believe that these are the kinds of programs that we should be keeping and that we should be funding. And so on and against. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Minority Floor Leader. Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just a quick response to the previous representative. We appreciate on appropriations the concerns about reductions to various programs. And I just want to remind the body that our budget back in May was predicted to be almost $750 million over budget. And as a result of that, we've gone through various actions over the course since then to basically present a balanced budget. This is one small step, and you will see multiple bills like this with similar language. And it's done because we had to cut over $120 million out of the Department of Health's budget in order to take the step 2 and step 3 cuts that we had to do in order to balance our budget. Every one of these things was performed with an understanding that it will impact our communities, it will impact services, and it will impact the lives of people in Wyoming. But if we did not do it, we would have to raise $300 or $400 or $500 or $600 million in taxes to cover the various cuts that we made and that the governor has implemented since July of last year. And this is one of the recommendations from the Department of Health with various programs that are cut. The cuts that are imposed, for those that you don't know, on the general fund, the Department of Health is one of the big three. It's one of the largest departments that receives its dollars from general fund dollars, which is the fund that we basically simply did not have enough money to continue the services of government that we were offering prior to July of last year. So you'll see this again as we go through the days and weeks, and you'll see various other programs and dollar amounts that have been reduced by the Department of Health in order to balance their budget. So I would just suggest that some services will be cut. We have to tighten our belts. We have to live within our means. And this is just one small step, multiple that you'll see, where we are basically trying to live within our means. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chairman Washut, I think, was first, and then we'll go Jennings and Ottman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question for the Chairman of Committee number 2. These bills that provide this provisional language that is permissive or says that the funding will be there contingent upon availability, they don't actually cut the budget, true? And so we don't necessarily need to debate the budgetary aspects on each of these bills. We're going to have a budget bill to debate, correct?
Thank you. Representative Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So my question would be, in this, if I'm understanding this correctly, the employees that administer these programs, we're not cutting any of those positions. We're leaving the program intact. So what happens to those people that were currently administering these programs?
Thank you, Representative Jennings. We'll get one more question. Representative Ottman, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question kind of goes along with the last question. I was wondering, with the elimination or cutting for just a little while, I won't even say cutting, but suspension of funds depending on availability of the block grant, does that mean that the program is going to go away? Do they have other sources of income, or is that part of an overall budget for the department? Is that something maybe I can have an answer to? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Vice Chairman Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and all good questions that we had anticipated to some degree. I just want to back up and shift a little bit because there's two agencies that are really have a lot of similar function. This is not part of the Department of Health budget. This is part of the agency 049 that deals with children. And you look at line 17, I think it says something about a department that says something to do with family services, if I read that correctly. And their expectation is to take $22 million in general fund cuts. And when you look at that agency, there's few places that they can take general fund cuts. You can look at the boys' school and the girls' school and programs like these. And in reality, that's what they've done. In response to the good representative over the mountain from Laramie or from Cheyenne, from the capital, that expressed concern and a no vote on this. The response from the good representative from the county of Trona really put it correctly. This is just saying when funds are available, they can do it. If there's no funds, they're not required to. And so you can hash out the merits of the cuts in the budget bill when we get to that point. This would actually keep the program in place and allow that to move forward as funding is available. So this agency's taken $22 million out of their budget in general fund appropriations. How is the administration for this taken care of? And remember that there's 14 counties that receive the grants for this. The administration for the CJSB is really done on the county, on the local level with the board. the administration overseeing the grant within the department is part less than 50% of one of the administrative staff's responsibilities. So as they shift responsibilities, that individual will take other responsibilities there. So there's only one that really overseeing that. And I hope that answered the question to the good representative up on the east side of the Bighorns. To the to my colleague from my county, other sources is the trouble here in this agency when they're required to take the cuts that they are required to take out of general funds because they can't use federal funds. In a large portion of their budget is based on general funds. And so when we ask them to make these general fund reductions, these are the areas where it hurts. Now, in credit back to the agency, they did not, by the dark of night, slip in and identify the 14 counties and say, here we are, and these cuts are now. They've prepped them for that, and they've kept funding in for this fiscal year so that they could prepare for the downsizing that was going to be required for them starting in July of this coming fiscal year. And so they worked really hard to keep these people informed and appraised of what we're doing. And again, the language of the bill says when there's funds available, we don't delete the program. But if we don't have the language, then the department would be required to make the cuts, and then try to fund the board with funds from where. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I would answer further questions or call for the vote.
Thank you, Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the representative out of Lander. I really appreciate a lot of the questions being answered there. I want to say for just a second that I recognize that what the chairman of this committee spoke to is we're going to start seeing a lot of this as these things start to move through, and all of these cuts that we're starting to see are going to be ultimately are going to be the cuts that none of us want to see. These are the services and the programs that actually affect people's lives on a daily basis, and that's going to be what we start to see. So, unless we want to have discussions about revenue or something like that, these are the types of cuts we're going to have. But more pointed here to a question to the vice chairman, if I could. I have a little bit of an ambiguity in the way that the statute reads when we change this bill. It says, subject to the availability of funds, the department shall administer. The way I hear this is subject to the availability of funds, the department may administer. And so my question is that the current statute says the department shall administer a comprehensive state program. And so when we say they're subject to the availability of funds and we're giving permission, I always feel like that's a very ambiguous opportunity, and it should read more of a may. And so I'm curious as to who determines, if that's going to be our committee number 2 or the governor, who would ultimately determine what the availability of funds is and whether they shall enforce this program or have this program. I feel like that's maybe a second reading amendment may need to come into this to clean this up a little bit. If I could get an answer on that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Brown. Vice Chairman Larson.
So I think ultimately, Mr. Chairman, and back to the good representative from the capital city, is that the determining factor on whether the program would move forward in years down the road would depend on the budgetary process. So the agency comes in and says, we would like to fund this board again, and we're requesting X amount of dollars. The governor would then put that in his budget. It would become before the appropriations committee. Just for the sake of this conversation, we approve it, then it would come before the rest of you to approve and say, okay, it's been approved and now you shall. But if we don't approve it, then they won't.
Okay. All right, further discussion. Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I guess maybe a different way to ask this question, because I don't know that I quite got away what I'm trying to get to. So instead of saying subject to the availability of funds, wouldn't it have been just as easy to say the department may administer a comprehensive program? It gives the flexibility and it releases the funding question, and no longer puts us in a position of whether or not then the department and the governor can decide at that point whether this is a priority to them. I guess to me, inserting the language subject to the availability of funds, they shall, to me, it's very, very ambiguous. And I'm not sure I quite follow what that language would be versus the department may administer if they feel that this is, an important program.
Thank you. Representative Fortner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Are we looking at maybe a program that's duplicated throughout the justice system somewhere? There's reason why we can maybe eliminate this. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Fortner. Vice Chairman Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to our good freshman legislator from up in the coal country. The answer to that, yes, the responsibility really for juveniles coming into the system falls upon the district court, and it is the burden of the county. And what these community juvenile service boards do is try to divert and have used those funds in a pretty good manner to as a diversion process away from the court system. So removing it, you're exactly right. It doesn't impede the ability for these juveniles to appear, but and the boards can certainly also apply for other grants from the county or from other places if they feel that diversion away from district courts is important.
Okay, thank you very much. Further discussion on House Bill 48. Further discussion. Representative Schwartz.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just to address the question about whether or not this program could go away, having worked with it a great deal in my county, it facilitates the ability of the various groups that are working with juveniles at risk. And this would be the school district, this would be the youth service provider, this would be the county attorney's office, to make sure that we're getting the best outcome possible for the juvenile that gives them the opportunity to succeed in future life, because incarceration may not be the best alternative. And if we can use the diversion programs to assist with that, is beneficial to the juvenile, to the family, and ultimately to our budget. And it's unfortunate that we do not have funding for this at the time, but part of the discussion in the committee was that there are other funding mechanisms we're using for juveniles that we consider to be more critical at the moment. And when the opportunity arises, it would be my desire to refund this program. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Schwartz. Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just in response to the good representative from the capital city on the ambiguous of may versus shall. Obviously, shall is the current language, and it's typical of this type of legislation. I would suggest that if it were may, that would be more ambiguous and leave more flexibility or less direction from the legislative bodies on implementation of this program. We like this program. We want it to be implemented, but we only want it to be implemented if we have sufficient funds to do so. And so I personally, I think the existing language is less ambiguous and more appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Any further discussion? Further discussion on House Bill 48. Further discussion on House Bill 48. Seeing none, all those in favor of Chairman Nicholas's motion that the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 48 do pass. Please raise your hand to your screen. Thank you. All those opposed? Thank you. House Bill 48 has passed Committee of the Whole. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the Committee of the Whole begs leave to rise and sit again until 2 p.m. And Mr. Speaker, the body will have received an email from staff that will show them how to register for a House Appropriations meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. So you've heard the motion. Chairman Nicholas, committee announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I believe we have one or two bills that we got through. And what re-referral is, for those of you who don't know, is anytime there's an appropriation that either adds money or takes money out of the budget. And all those bills are referred to the Appropriations Committee to review the funding component of those bills. And so I think there's just one bill that we just went through that requires an appropriation. Is that, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Majority Floor Leader, I think that's accurate. And so that bill, we will take that up in appropriations at noon and review the appropriation in the bill, if that's correct. But I'll go to Majority Floor Leader. You'll also see circulated, I think, of the bills we went through today that were introduced, there's about 9 bills that have appropriations. What that means is when we get to the other bills that have appropriations, we will list those and review those this afternoon in order to turn those around and get them back to the floor for debate as fast as possible. So that's the purpose. But if they are your bills, just pay attention to come and help present explanations of those budgetary costs that are in the bills when joint appropriations meets either at lunch or on adjournment. Thank you. And
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Summers, can you tell me what bills those are? I didn't keep track.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'll read through those since I referred the bills. And there's some big bills in here, including the omnibus water bill. So House Bill 44, 58, 66, 15, 29, 17, 18, 9, and House Bill 4. So those are the bills that we referred. That doesn't mean that the committee may get them all worked between now and 2 o'clock, but certainly those bills are available to be for the committee to review, the Joint Appropriations Committee. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. And so none of the bills that we've heard so far in Committee of the Whole have an appropriation. And so that's why they weren't re-referred. You won't hear them in Committee of the Whole until they have come out of Committee number 2 on a re-referral. And so in fact, we do have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 bills, something like that, that the committee will try to get through in that time period. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further business? Chairman Burkhart, announcements?
No announcements, Mr. Speaker, but a question, please. If the good chairman of appropriations has come up with a ranking order or an order of preference on the re-referred bills.
Chairman Nicholas, do you want to address the order you may take them up today?
Yes, we will circulate them right now. I'll just pull them up and forward it to everybody.
All right, thank you very much. So you should receive a message from LSO telling you how to tune in to the re-referral, the Corporations Committee, if you're interested in any of the bills or you're presenting any of the bills. Any further announcements? Any further announcements? All those in favor of the Majority Floor Leader's motion that we sit again at 2 p.m., please raise your hands. Thank you. All those opposed? Thank you. The House is in recess until 2 p.m. Well done.